Noboa doesn't have control of the international cocaine markets. He doesn't have control of cocaine production in Colombia and Peru. Ecuador has an active military of about 40,000. Gangs are estimated to number at least 20,000, and it has no control of its prisons. So what do you do even if you arrest criminals and send them to prison?
I want to cross over to South America, if I may, because Ecuador's president has ordered that criminal gangs be neutralized after days of violence, which culminated in an attack on a television studio. On Monday, President Daniel Noboa issued a 60-day state of emergency following the disappearance of notorious gang boss Adolfo Macias Villamar from his prison cell in the country's largest city. Well, Jon Bonfiglio is with us now, the Times Latin American correspondent. Jon, hello, good to speak to you tonight.
Good evening, Rick.
Jon, how unsafe is Ecuador right now?
Well, it is now officially the most dangerous, statistically, the most dangerous country in Latin America, having been one of the safest countries just a few years ago. As you say, the president has declared a state of emergency, then a state of exception. Now an internal armed conflict is what is the official terminology as to what is being experienced, but you can call it what you like. Ecuador is suffering an existential problem, which it is wholly unprepared for.
How has Ecuador gone from being one of the safest countries in Latin America to one of the most dangerous?
This is to do with cocaine. This is to do with the trafficking of drugs. It is to do with a 2019 opened deep water port on its coast, just down the coast from Guayaquil. It's its biggest city, which is one of the reasons why a lot of this violence has been centered in Guayaquil, because gangs are fighting for territory there. As the security situation in Colombia has acted as a country in the peace process over the last few years, it's been harder to export cocaine from that particular country. And of course, to the south, Ecuador also has Peru. The level of unpreparedness that Ecuador has had historically, and as I say, this deep water port means now that actually it is the perfect context for gangs to be able to move cocaine in particular out of the country and across to Europe and the USA. And it is the struggle for territory, for land, that these new gangs, it's very much about the anarchy before the fights, before these things settle, are struggling over. And the two biggest gangs, you cited this figure of Adolfo Macias, who escaped from prison, from a low security prison, remarkably, on Sunday, given the fact that he's the most notorious criminal in Ecuador. But that tells you that Ecuador has no control over its prisons. His gang, the Los Choneros, are connected to the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. And the next biggest gang in Ecuador, Los Lobos, are connected to the Jalisco New Generation cartel in Mexico. This is all, they are not local gangs. These are international crime, multi-layered crime organizations with local enforcers in different countries that are currently trying to send the most violent message possible in Ecuador in order for the state to let them go about their business.
Jon, before you go, can we just talk about the role of President Noboa here? Now, he's just 36 years old. He became Ecuador's youngest ever head of state after winning that election that was tarnished by the assassination of the presidential candidate and journalist Fernando Villavicencio. What's he saying he's going to do about this to slow down and cut this violence?
He is saying that he is going to take control. The state of exception and the internal armed conflict means now that what we've seen actually today in Ecuador after the chaos of yesterday is that we have soldiers on the streets across the country. Anyone who can is bunkering down. But we now have a militarized country, and that is going to be the case for the foreseeable future. But Noboa doesn't have control of the international cocaine markets. He doesn't have control of cocaine production in Colombia and Peru. Ecuador has an active military of about 40,000. Gangs are estimated to number at least 20,000, and it has no control of its prisons. So what do you do even if you arrest criminals and send them to prison? Also bear in mind that Guillermo Lasso, the previous president, declared 20 separate states of emergency during his shortened tenure, and that didn't achieve very much at all. So he is pretty much stuck. And even if the US comes out and condemns the attacks as it has, and has pledged to increase cooperation with the government, there is very little fundamentally that is in the gift of Ecuador to control the anarchy and the chaos that we saw sharp-ended yesterday.
An incredibly difficult state of affairs. Jon, thank you for talking to us today.
No problem at all, Rick.
Jon Bonfiglio there, the Times Latin American correspondent, really bringing it home about, how things have changed in Ecuador in the last few years. Jon's saying there, it's now the most statistically dangerous country in Latin America. And if you just went back a few years, it was one of the safest. So 60-day state of emergency declared in Ecuador.